Just a teaser for our lecture today. This is our fourth lecture. Prof. Osman will speak about Islam as a way of middleness, balance, and sustainability. We have done 3 lectures before, monthly lectures. Prof. Osman is a well-known scholar, well-known individual. We can always search for his background from all over the internet. So, without further ado, we invite our dear respected Professor Osman to continue with the lecture. Okay, Prof.
Thank you, Brother Sharan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and very good afternoon, wherever, or good morning, wherever you are right now. First of all, I would like to convey to you all the greetings, salam from Professor Dr. Imtiaz, our regular moderator. He had eye surgery, and I think today is his last day of medical leave, so it's unfortunate that he won't be able to be here. But I'd also like to welcome, in particular, this delegation from the Ministry of Communications and Media. I understand there I can see Yang Berhormat Datuk Salahuddin, my good friend. So thank you with all your officers for whole group of your people trying to be at this program today. Certainly for newcomers also, thank you very much for your attendance. So as Brother Sharan mentioned, this is our 4th lecture in the series of the ISTAC's the community engagement lectures. I think 1 or 2 more. I have about maybe 2 or 3 more before I complete the series. As for today, as you are aware, the title is Islam as a way of middleness, balance, and sustainability. Now, these 3 words, middleness, balance, and sustainability, are familiar words. Familiar words, perhaps, although I did receive a question or inquiry or comment from someone, is middleness is it really an English word? Is it in the dictionary? Well, I mean, I have been using this word actually, and I did find some online encyclopedias using that. But I'll explain to you later what this all means. The point is, these 3 words are very important. They are concepts about self-development and the human condition. They are also about community, society, and civilization development. So it's very important. To be noted here is that the 3 concepts are closely interrelated. How the 3 concepts are interrelated may be stated as follows. We human beings must walk in the path of middleness, or strive to be in the middle path of life. We must walk, we must belong to the people of middleness. Why middleness? Because without middleness, there will be no balance and equilibrium in life. And without middleness and without balance and equilibrium in life, our society, whether this life is at the individual or collective level, our society will not be able to sustain its integral well-being or to sustain success for that matter. And conversely, without the capacity to sustain to healthy growth and integral well-being, our society would be lethargic and lack stability and equilibrium, thereby making it difficult for its members to live a balanced, peaceful, and happy life. My introductory remarks on middleness, balance, and sustainability are meant to emphasize their strategic importance to the human condition. The truth about these three ideas that I would like to put across to you is that both individually and collectively, they mean so much to us as individuals and as a community, as a society, and as a civilization, so much so that we could only ignore or marginalize them in our life at our own peril. I consider it as very, very serious. The quality of our own human condition would necessarily depend on how successful we are in realizing the civilizational values of middleness or civilizational virtues of middleness, balance, and sustainability in every sector of our life. The implication of this truth is very obvious. We, individually as human beings and collectively as citizens of our respective countries, have no choice but to pursue middleness, balance, and sustainability as obligatory goals. I repeat, as obligatory goals in our life. All of them, all the three together, and also simultaneously. Not one after another, because of the interconnection between the three. Let me emphasize that Islam as a religion, as a deen, pays due importance to all the three ideas and concepts. As a matter of fact, the Quran makes explicit references to them, as we shall see later. It is because of the Quran's emphatic teachings on these ideas and concepts that I was motivated to speak of Islam as a way of middleness, as a way of balance, as a way of sustainability. In my view, middleness, balance, and sustainability constitute integral components of Islam's ancestral teachings. And further, I venture to say that from the Islamic perspective, the pursuit of middleness, balance, and sustainability has become a fardu kifayah in our present time. People may contest that, but I strongly believe that in our time, it has become a fardu kifayah, meaning a societal obligation that Muslims as a community must honor, failing which the whole community will suffer from the consequences of inaction. Why has such a pursuit become a fardu kifayah? Simply put, for numerous reasons, our contemporary human civilization and the Earth's planetary biophysical ecology are deteriorating. Let's not forget that the planet Earth is our only planetary home. In the context of Malaysia, a multi-religious country, the societal obligation in question would only be executed if there were to be close collaborative efforts among all the religious groups. This means that there should be an inter-religious dialogue on the grand theme of middleness, balance, and sustainability viewed as both individual and societal virtues. The quicker, the better. Since these ideas and virtues are universal in nature, I expect the to-be-held dialogue to be smooth and fruitful. After all religions have something fundamental to say about the importance of middleness, balance, and sustainability in to human salvation, although, of course, in different ways. Let's now discuss these three fundamental concepts in greater detail, beginning with middleness. I'm using the word middleness to translate the Arabic word tawassut, the fifth verbal form, which is a synonym of wasatiyah. Tawassut and wasatiyah are synonymous. Right now, the word wasatiyah is more popular than the word tawassut, but both Arabic words convey the core meaning of middleness. That is the quality of being middle or of being at the center. The popular English rendering of the word wasatiyah is moderation. My good friend, Professor Hashim Kamali, whom I consider as a modern scholar to have written the best work in English so far on the subject of wasatiyah. He translated it as moderation. Allahyarham Professor Ismail Faruqi, in his book Tawhid and its Implications, used a different word, renders it as the golden mean. I can understand, for good reason. Professor Osman is a philosopher of ethics. He did, his PhD thesis on Christian ethics. So, because of that, the word golden mean was much nearer to his own heart's consciousness, and going back also to the Greek tradition. Ismail Faruqi said that Islam is the religion of the golden mean. He also said that Islam is the religion of balance. But whatever the English rendering of the word, the idea of wasatiyah itself has equivalence in the other religious traditions. This is important for us. For Muslims, we live together with people of different faiths in this country to know what are the equivalents of wasatiyah. So I mentioned here, example, Chung-Yun in Confucianism, Majjhima Patipada, which is the middle path of Buddhism. Then, of course, the Greek golden mean in Christianity and even in pre-Christianity West. I mentioned, and of course, I mentioned Greek. That is important because the Bible was first translated into Greek before any other language. From Aramaic, it was translated into Greek, and it is from Greek words that the English word golden mean that we have today. Now, but for myself, as an English rendering of the word wasatiyah, I prefer middleness to moderation, and I even prefer to golden mean. Although I myself have used both, but when compared, if I go into detail, I prefer middleness for both epistemological and practical reasons. Epistemologically, middleness appears to have a broader semantic field than moderation. That is the main reason. From the practical point of view, the word moderation has been misused and abused. Both misused and abused. The use of middleness and on the other hand, the use of middleness and golden mean would allow us to connect ourselves, to relate wasatiyah in a clearer manner to Chung-Yung, Majjhima Patipada, and the golden mean compared to moderation. So that's my main argument why I prefer middleness. Now, give me an illustration of why I prefer the word middleness to moderation or to golden mean. Middleness is applicable to different forms. It's applicable to many aspects of wasatiyah. In other words, if we understand the range of meanings conveyed by wasatiyah, then we know that moderation or golden mean would not be able to convey that. But it's not that middleness is synonymous. It is the best term, or middleness is a perfect term to translate wasatiyah, but better than moderation and golden mean. So I give you an example to show middleness is applicable to the physical, geographical dimension of wasatiyah. I repeat, physical, geographical dimension of wasatiyah, not just moral and ethical. So the word moderation is not applicable to the physical, geographical dimension of wasatiyah. The Quran in Surah Al-Bakar, chapter 2, verses 142 and 143. So in the Quran, Surah Bakar, Al-Baqarah, verse 142 is connected to verse 143 according to some commentators of the Quran, Al-Mufassirun. So in verse 142 is about the change of Qibla from Jerusalem to Mecca. So verse 142 was referring to the fact that Allah has already changed the Qibla of the new Muslim community, the Muslim Ummah, from Jerusalem to Mecca. And what is in verse 142? Verse in 142 is about Ummatan Wasatan. So in fact, immediately after verse 142, there is the beginning of 143, كَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. I would like to refer to the tafsirs of Ibn Abbas and Al-Baidawi. Ibn Abbas he refers to that kazalik. There's a very important connection, kazalik, thus, as following immediately after verse 142. Thus, we have made you ummatan wasatan, the middle community. So in other words, there is a connection between the change of Qibla to the naming, to the characterization of the new Ummah as Ummatan Wasatan. Now, in the case of Badawi as well, but in the case of Ibn Abbas, but of course the two did not explain in detail what's the connection there. They just say there is a connection. In the case of Ibn Abbas, he mentioned that the rationale for the Qibla change was that the rationale for the change of Qibla was that God wanted to honor the new Muslim community in Medina with the Qibla of Abraham, which was Mecca, befitting his identity as Ummatan Wasat. Al-Badawi on the hand simply just said that Mecca was a better Qibla for the new Ummah than Jerusalem, without giving any reason. We know many scholars have dealt with the issue of why Mecca is better than Jerusalem as a permanent Qibla for the Prophet's new community. But that's not the truth, but it's not the issue in which we are primarily interested here. It's not the issue of that Mecca is better than Baitul Maqdis, Jerusalem. What we are interested here, right, what we want to know is in what way had Makkah, by virtue of being the new Qibla, contributed to the wasatiyah or middleness character or the middleness character of the new community? That's the question. That's the issue. Please reflect on that. I spent some time to reflect that. Yeah. So, in my view, the answer may be found in the idea of the middleness, of centrality of Makkah itself. That has nothing to do with the idea of moderation. How can you talk about, the Makkah is kind of, by virtue of moderation, nothing to do with that. The Quran posited Makkah, as far as from the perspective of the Quran, the Quran posited Makkah as the first and last spiritual center of the world. Makkah was the Qibla for Abraham and Adam. Prophet Adam, of course, first, Quran refers to Bakar, the old name of Makkah, and God built the first house of worship. That now, if you look to traditional Islamic geography, so traditional geography mentioned Makkah as the physical center of the earth. I know some Western academics interested in who are knowledgeable about geography, trying to test or to verify some of the claims in the traditional literature, whether it is true that Makkah is the center, the physical center of the earth. Of course, the Quran refers to Makkah as a spiritual center. The first person, the first prophet, right? In the sense that he was created out of the clay of the Makkah area, the first house of worship there, and then this Prophet Muhammad as the last as the prophet, so Mecca becomes a spiritual center again. So what I would like to argue here is that Wasatiyah also has a connotation of physical, geographical middleness. This middleness would then be unique to Islam. May not be at the other middle aspects of middleness, but when it comes to this physical, geographical middleness, it is unique to Islam. That's why I just give one example. To show why middleness would serve better as rendering of Wasatiyah. There are many things to be said about the issue of Makkah as the center. As I said, this found in the traditional Islamic geography. And just to add one more, without going into detail, the fact that in the Quran there is a verse referring to the middle prayer, Salah al-Wusta, in order to answer prayer. Certainly, you cannot apply moderation. That you cannot say the answer prayer is a moderation of the other prayers. No, you can hardly say that. You can say that it is the middle in a sense. Yes, it is the middle between. On one side you have Fajr and you have Fajr and Zuhr, and the other one is Maghrib and Isha. But I think more important is that the question of the importance of the prayer in terms of the value. Now, having said that, the word Wasatiyah is so rich in meaning that it would be impossible, simply impossible, to find one single English word that will adequately convey the full meaning, its full meaning. As I see it, both the word moderation and middleness are inadequate renderings of Wasatiyah. Moderation itself is only one of several forms of middleness, for it pertains primarily to ethical virtues, talking about the middle virtues as the mean between two extremes. between excess and the deficiency. So in that, based on this consideration, I will say that the best thing in talking about wasatiyah, the best thing to do is just to retain the word wasatiyah without translating it into whichever language. We can explain the meaning, but not to use another English word. And I would say the same thing with the Chung-Yung of Confucianism. We do want the Majjhima Khatipada for Buddhism. Just keep it in the original language. Now, there are three questions about middleness that I would like to address. First, what then is the complete meaning of middleness? In other words, what are the ideals of middleness? What are the ideals of middleness in life, both in personal life and in community life? Second, what are the challenges and obstacles to the realization of middleness, to wasatiyah? And how can we overcome these challenges and obstacles? This I'm putting to you all for reflection. If indeed wasatiyah is so important to Islam, and indeed to religion in general, then we have to address these three questions. Since my dealing mainly with Islam, because my focus is on Islam, so on the first question regarding the meaning and ideals of wasatiyah, I would like to stress here that notwithstanding its great significance for human life and thought in general, and Islamic life and thought in particular, there are only a few good writings on the subject. So it's unfortunate. Certainly, I would recommend Professor Hashim Kamal's book, The Middle Path of Moderation in Islam. It is, I mean, the rendering into moderation, that's something else, then a side issue, because to me, what's important here, how he treated the issue of wasatiyah. I mean, it's very, very comprehensive discussion of wasatiyah, and also related to wasatiyah, the doctrine of tawazun, the balance, yeah, showing that the two are related. So I certainly recommend you all to read the book. It's a very, very good one as far as the concept of wasatiyah. Now, the word wasatiyah does not occur in the Quran. It does not occur in the Quran, but it became famous because of the term ummatan wasatan, which occurs in one Quranic verse, right? Which I already referred just now, Surah Al-Bakar. For those not familiar, this is the chapter, the second chapter, the chapter of the cow, verse 143. I translate and reproduce here the translation. Thus, we have made you an ummah, a community, justly balanced. I'm taking here the translation from Yusuf Ali. He translated wasatan as justly balanced, which is justified, fully justified, and as we shall see later, in other words, the question of balance and also the question of justice, that you might be witnesses of a nation, shuhada and nas, and the messenger, a witness over yourself. So that is how the Quran describes the middle community, the middleness of that in this particular verse. Now, the words wasat, in this case wasatan, and wasatiyah are closely related because they are derived from the same root word, the triliteral root, waw, sin, ta. So the verbal form wasata and other derived forms convey the meanings of middle, center, heart, moderate, average, mean, equilibrium, and the best part of something, of a thing. So you look at that range of meaning. So you have to see the context. You have to, the different derived words are used, the context they are used. But this is the range of meaning, what I call the semantic field of wasata. Now, this wide range of meanings or semantic field would allow us to have a broad conception of wasatiyah. The literal meaning, of course, is just simply the middle community, and in Bahasa Malaysia, in Malay, you can use the umat pertengahan. But the idea of middleness encompasses several fundamental meanings that enable us to speak of the ideals of wasatiyah. It helps us. We are looking for the ideals of wasatiyah, right? So by just looking at the fundamental meanings of the word wasatiyah, then we have that. So let me first address this question of the ideals of wasatiyah. What are the ideals that should guide us in our thinking, in our action, in our life? There are 4 ideals I mentioned here. I would like to mention here 4 ideals of wasatiyah. First, living means to live in wasatiyah, to live in the spirit of wasatiyah. First means of all, to live at or close to the center, to be close to the center, to be in the middle, both in the physical and spiritual sense. In other words, to live in middleness. I refer to Makkah as the earthly spiritual center. Makkah as the earthly spiritual center has a psychological function in the life of believers. The physical, geographical dimension of wasatiyah. Makkah means many things to Muslims, and certainly its position as the spiritual center serves the kind of psychological function for the Muslim. 5 times a day, at least, the believer is reminded of the symbolism of the center. So it helps us psychologically. 5 times a day, at least, we are facing Makkah, the center, spiritual center of the world. We are reminded, and we understand the meaning of the symbolism so much the better. I like to draw an analogy. In physics, all right, we learn the concept of center of gravity. Center of gravity. Well, in the spiritual world, there is also a kind of center of gravity. So I call it the center of our spiritual gravity, which is none other as the heart, the heart. After Hadith refers to the heart as the seat or the throne of God, the heart of the believer, of course, the heart of the believer. So, well, in physics, what do you mean by center of gravity? The point at which the entire weight, the center of gravity is the point, this imaginary point, at which the entire weight of a body may be considered as concentrated, so that if supported at this point, the body would remain in equilibrium in any position. So just draw an analogy with the spiritual world, all right? And then we'll come, very interestingly, come up with the concept of our equilibrium, in which the body, the mind, the soul, the spirit, the heart are all in a state of equilibrium. So no wonder some Muslim scholars considered wasatiyah as synonymous with tawazun, because tawazun precisely conveying that meaning. Now, Of course, theologically, God is the center of everything. To be close to the center is to be close to God. So that is the important thing to realize. Yeah? So wasatya means to be at the center, to be close to God. If we are able to realize wasatya in its many different dimensions and aspects, then we will be, inshallah, close to God. So that is the first ideal, how to live at the center. The second ideal is to be just and to love justice. That is the second meaning, the second principle of wasatya, the second meaning of wasatya. This is based on the hadith of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was asked, by this based on the hadith narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, on the what's the meaning of ummatan wasatan? What's the meaning of wasatya? The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam simply said, justice, to be just. In other words, to be the middleness means justice. All right? So this is the second meaning. It's very second principle. So to live to the expectations of wasatya, to live in the spirit of wasatya, is to live in justice, to practice justice, to honor justice. Very important ideal. Then ideal number 3, the meaning of wasatya is al-khiyar, the idea of the best, right? Al-khiyar. This is, if we refer to Arabic lexicon, they will refer to you, one of the meaning is, one of the meanings of wasatun, in adjective form, is precisely to be the best part of something. So to be the best, to be the cream of society, referring to the best part of society. So the khairun ummah in the Quran conveying the idea of excellence. So that is the third principle. So therefore we strive to be at the center is to strive to be excellent. And number 4, related to number 1, the question of middleness, is to be endowed with sense of proportion. This is a lacking quality in many of us, how to have a sense of proportion. I like to quote the Malay proverb, traditional Malay proverb, which conveys this meaning of sense of proportion. Buat baik berpada-pada, buat jahat jangan sekali. It's a very beautiful principle of sense of proportion. It's interesting. We have the word pada. One by berpada-pada. Repeat it, pada-pada, sense of proportion. Now, the concept of the middle way of Buddhism, the Pali language, of course, Pali is one source of the ancient Malay, of the Malay language. Dua pada, pati pada. Dua pati pada. In Malay, pati is referring to the, to the essence, but pada is a pervasive word. Can be pada hari, pada. I mean, one of the words of the Pali language that has so much usage. But the point here is that to be endowed with a sense of proportion. As an individual, we want to be a person who is endowed with a sense of proportion. As a community, we want to have that sense of proportion between things. This sense of proportion will include the concept of priorities. Priorities. That's important to be realized. Now, the word, so I've given you 4 ideals of wasatiyah to be realized in our life. The word tawassut, in its linguistic sense, implies a kind of movement towards the center or the middle, as a kind of struggle or jihad to be at the center. It's not easy to be at the center. To maintain our center of spiritual gravity is very difficult. How to maintain that? So, but I'm saying that the Arabic word tawassul, because it belongs to the fifth verbal form, yeah, it implies an effort, implies a kind of dynamism. So in this case, the dynamism is the going, pointing our face towards the center. And no matter what the obstacles are, we'll try to overcome, so that instead of facing the other way, we're still facing towards the center. So the ummatan wasatan is aware of what it means existentially to always possess the quality of middleness. For Islam, the Prophet ﷺ embodies the ideals of wasatiyah. As expected, he is the perfect model on how to lead a life that is dedicated to the pursuit of wasatiyah. And then the role of the Sharia. The Sharia is the practical mechanism on how to conduct our everyday life in the spirit of wasatiyah. No wonder, according to the Quran, Allah SWT gave to every prophet a revelation, a minhaj, and a shira, meaning this the Sharia, the divine law, which is meant to enable that particular community to lead life of wasatiyah according to the conditions of the time. Now, the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, as the last prophet until the end of time, therefore, his Sharia is meant to be the model to lead wasatiyah life in the face of all conditions and challenges that we have seen and that we are going to see in the future. Now, let me see here also that, for followers of the other religions, some of you are here listening to me. For the followers of other religions, I would advise them to know better the middle path or the golden mean as practiced by the founders of their religion. And then we can have a dialogue. We can have a dialogue on what we mean by this, the middleness of wasatiyah. Now, to speak of ideals is also to speak of its opposite. So in knowing the ideal, we should also know the opposites. For example, the opposite of wasatiyah is tatarruf, extremism. In other words, as we struggle to move to the center, other forces, negative forces, are pulling us away from the center to the periphery. I think that is basically the essence, the philosophical meaning of human life. All right. What are the challenges and obstacles to wasatiyah? What are the challenges and obstacles? I give 2 main obstacles, which can be, of course, which can be detailed out, but I just, in general, say, number 1, the conditions in the external world, the conditions external to us, the conditions out there. When there are too many vices, too many negative forces pulling us apart in different directions. Our present time is a very, very challenging time, very challenging time. So certainly the conditions existing in our society pulling us apart in different directions. Now, adding to that, the second challenge is within the condition of our soul. The condition of society is one hand, the condition of our soul is another, and the two interact. Conditions in society and conditions in our soul interact. The inner forces within our own being that are pulling us apart from our own center, from our own true center, the spiritual heart. Our passional desires, what in Malay say the hawa nafsu, the shahwat, hawa nafsu, the hawa. Okay. So this is a force. This passional desires is a force that could, the set tendency, all right, a force that could lead us to evil and vices. And then we have the mind, our wandering mind, the mind that could have all kinds of imagination, both good and evil, and good and bad. So these two, the lower passion desires, the imagination, would clash with the desires of our true self and with the dictates of the intellect reason of our akal. This is the constant challenge that every one of us is facing, and which will affect in one way or another our quest for the Vasatya. So the result of this kind of clash, the pulling apart in different directions, could be, and for many indeed it has happened, so the result could be a state of imbalance and equilibrium. So the state of imbalance and disequilibrium as far as our individual's identity is concerned. So when this unwanted state, deteriorates to the critical level, it could manifest itself in various forms, such as mental illness. Well, precisely, what mental illness? Because we have not succeeded in disciplining our mind, or we fail to maintain that balance. So mental illness is just one of those consequences, and we are reminded that this is a rising phenomena, right? The phenomena of mental illness, which illustrate, which emphasize many of us have failed in this challenge, in facing this challenge. Some even worse, suicide. Suicide is simply the collapse of that system. The individual system has simply collapsed. All right. So the question, how to realize middleness in our life? How then? With that challenge? How? I don't think by depending on our reason alone, our intellect alone, will be enough. We need religion. We need God. We need religion. And not simply religion in an abstract way, but in a concrete way. And yes, religion is the traditional answer that has proved to be the most effective in helping its followers to realize middleness. For Muslims, they should know the Quran to understand the meaning of middleness or wasatya. And then, on top of that, they should follow the code of conduct as prescribed in the Sharia, which is the divine law. So we are both to understand and to act upon our understanding. So roughly that, it is not to go into the detail, but to me, that is the answer, the general answer to how to realize middleness in our life. So again, the Sharia plays an important role. Now, from the issue of wasatya, I want to question of balance. At the level of individual or personal life, without practicing wasatya in an efficacious manner, we will not be able to achieve balance and equilibrium in life. So that's why we start with wasatya. Wasatya. Yeah? Without wasatya, without realizing it, we cannot achieve balance and equilibrium. So what is the technical term for this thing that we call a balanced state of the individual person. The balanced state that keeps our body, our soul, our spirit, our heart, and our intellect, reason, mind in a harmonious relationship. There are several terms used by scholars. One word I mentioned just now is, of course, tawazun. Tawazun, used by Al-Faruqi, by Kamali, and they further say that tawazun is synonymous with wasatiyah. Of course, that claim has to be, for those of you who are academic scholars, want to study this in a deeper way, whether that is so, and I also have my reservation, but they are certainly related, but not necessarily being synonymous. Other words being used are wasnun, to weigh, weighing, all right, used in the Quran, mizan, and also qistas, which is closely related to justice. Important thing is that balance is closely related to justice. Mizan conveys the meanings of balance, scales, weight, measure, meter, rule, method, justice, equity, fairness, impartiality. All these meanings related to balance. Now, in the Quran, the letter root, wow, zainun, occurs 23 times, related to balance, 23 times, mostly in the derived forms mizan and its plural mawazin, 16 verses. I just, when I look at this verses and try, what is being emphasized? What are the things that are being emphasized in these verses related to balance? I don't look all of them, but I just look at some of them, but they represent the whole, in a sense, the whole semantic meanings that the Quran wants to convey regarding the balance. You can refer, for example, Surah 6, verse 152, Surah Al-An'am. Now, this verse refers to, this is translation of that part which is relevant. Say, give measure and weight with full justice. Give measure and weight with full justice. That is the command. That's God's command. Wa'fu al-kayla al-mizan bil-qist. That is that part of the verse, meaning give measure and weight. Of course, the tafsir of it is always, it's not just the physical measure and weight, but also measure and weight here referring also to intangible things, especially our behavior. How to weigh our action. Something like Imam Al-Ghazali wrote a book on Mizan al-Amal, in the balance of action. So in other words, both physical and intangible objects. Now, you have also in the Surah 7, verse 85, Surah Al-Araf, but instead of Bil-Qist, in the previous verse, instead we have the phrase, do not withhold from the people the things that are their due. Do not withhold from the people the things that do. So again, the question of justice, not to deprive people of their rights. Then chapter 1184, Surah Al-Hud. This is interesting because but of course, this again, give not short measure or weight. Prophet Shu'aib giving warning to his people, Madian people, the Midianites, whose sin was commercial selfishness and fraudulent dealings in ways and measures. I mean, there was widespread at that time, to the point that the Prophet Shu'aib has to give a stern warning to his people not to be indulged in this scene of commercial selfishness and fraudulent deeds. And it happens that the Middleness were commercial people. Now, again, in the following verse 85, Prophet repeated this call. Give just measure and weights, and do not withhold from the people the things they do. Right, that repeated means to emphasize the importance. Now, in the Surah 42, verse 17, Surah Al-Shura, I quote here the translation, "It is God who has sent down the book in truth and the balance." So the book, Al-Kitab, mentioned together with the balance, Al-Mizan. Allahu alladhi anzala al-kitaba bil-haq wal-mizan. So that, in other words, that's significant. Commentators of the Quran pointed to the significance that the two mentioned together, question of the truth and balance. Now, revelation is like a balance by which we can weigh not physical things, but we can weigh all moral issues. We can weigh all questions of right and wrong in conduct. How can we weigh? If you want to weigh gambling, is it good or bad? Well, human mind can debate on that question, the good and bad. And the Quran mentions, of course, the question, whether good or bad. The Quran mentions, yes, there is something good, there is something bad, but the bad outweighs the good. So it requires the balance of revelation to come to that conclusion in a decisive manner, whereas the human mind can contest on that without any conclusion can go on, because for everything new good that is pointed out, we can find out also perhaps even more what is bad regarding that. Now, I have a sort of time. Now, I go now to the next one. Yes, Surah. What to mention another verse? Surah 55, Surah Ar-Rahman, verse 7, because here the Quran refers to the firmament, and the firmament he has raised high, and he has had the balance. Yeah. So here the balance referring to cosmic balance. In other words, based on the idea of cosmic justice. Right. In Surah Ar-Rahman, 3 verses together mentioned referring to the balance al-mizan. So all related to justice, the cosmic justice, and justice here on earth. Why there's order? There's order in the world, in the natural world, in the cosmos, just because there is justice, and justice is there because God has set up the balance. And the final verse I want to refer here, verse 57, Surah Al-Hadid, verse 25, said, "We send before our messengers with clear signs, and send down with the book and the balance that men may stand forth in justice." So, to conclude on the question of this balance, referring to the word tawazun, so the key word here is tawazun. Tawazun is the dynamic state of equilibrium. I would define tawazun as the dynamic state of equilibrium, a consequence of living the wasatiyah way. And one of the rules of the Sharia is to enable tawazun, just as one of the rules of the Sharia is to enable wasatiyah. So it is also the role of the Sharia to enable tawazun. And the writings of different scholars have been detailed different kinds of mizan. For example, Ibn Arabi refers to distinguishes between al-mizan al-shari, referring to the Sharia, the balance of the Sharia in this world, but also the al-mizan al-ilahi, that's referring to the mizan, that the balance that operates in the next world, on the day of judgment. Our deeds will be weighed by this mizan, right? So you have the right hand scale, and the lower under the left hand scale, and we will be weighed. And it is very quite clear from this that the whole idea is to establish justice. Now, I just want to finish my last brief reference to the question of sustainability. I'm not going to say much today because next week, I want to reserve for that session next week. ISTAC is going a very important forum. The members of the forum, Professor Yasir Auda, Professor Hashim Kamali, Professor Rahina Abdullah, and also the rector of the Islamic University, and myself. The topic is the Sharia and the pursuit of sustainable society. So I just refer to you briefly this one. I will say more about it in my program next week. Question of sustainability. To me, terminology is always important. So right now, in Arabic, what are the terms used to connote sustainability? Sustainable. It's a very, very fashionable word. So I gather that from the current Arabic, two words to refer to sustainability. Istidama from Qasadama, from the in, referring to something that can derive something that endures, that is permanent, that is to stay. That is used, and the other one is from the Marra. This is the istimrariya. Istimrariya. There's another word. So I thought, all right, I always refer to the Quran to refer. Is there any terminology from the Quran that will be closer to the issue at hand? And I will invite all of you. After this, you go back while you're already at home. Look at this. Because I'm suggesting another term, and which I wanted to say more next week, inshallah. I want to use. I'm proposing the word istiqrar. Ra. Why? Well, I want you to refer to the long passage in Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verses 30 to verses 39, 10 verses. Right? Verse 30 to verse 39. It's about what? It's about starting from God wants to place Adam on earth as his vicegerent, as his Khalifa. And the kinds of what he gives to Adam, taught knowledge and so on, and then the role of the Iblis and so on, and Adam and Eve and his wife, and were asked to be on earth. So I thought, since the passage deals with about God placing Adam and Eve on the planet Earth as their home for a while, and then God mentioned that they can eat, they can drink, whatever they like, right? And God mentioned in one verse, I'm going to refer to it, that on earth, everything is there for you to live a good life, right? And of course, until the end of time, when the present earth will be transformed into another earth, right? So this to me, with that kind of background, will be a better choice term. The word is mustakarun. Yeah? So I suggest istiqrar as more appropriate, because in this verse, say, go you down,
all of you with enmity between yourselves. On earth will be your dwelling place and your means of livelihood for a time. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُسْتَقَارٌ وَمَتَاعٌ إِلَى حِينٍ. مَتَاعٌ مُسْتَقَارٌ. If I were to paraphrase this verse, it means that on earth will be your sustainable home. Your sustainable home, your dwelling place that is sustainable, your means of livelihood. You can even create a civilization there on the planet Earth. So in other words, the Earth has been created to be sustainable. But of course, we have the problems of human beings, right? The problems of human beings who will pollute, who will corrupt the Earth, who will destroy the Earth, all right? That's why in those verses also mentioned, therefore, one of the verses there refers, after you, okay, I have instructed you, you have received my instruction, you live on earth, but from time to time, guidance will come from me. Guidance will come from me. Those who follow my guidance will succeed. Those who all disobey my guidance will receive their consequences. So we need to analyze these verses of the Quran, and actually I understand from time to time there will be guidance from Allah. In other words, God sends prophets and messengers after Adam until Prophet Muhammad sallallahu thousands, hundreds of thousands. According to one hadith, it's 124,000 prophets and messengers bringing message to their respective communities. The idea is so that they continue to live a sustainable life. So my conclusion, from this, my inferences from this is that when we talk about sustainability, it is important that we realize, first of all, this wasatiyah and tawazun. In other words, wasatiyah and tawazun, middleness and balance, are preconditions of sustainability. And tawazun. And we are looking for a single thread that passes through wasatiyah, tawazun, istiqrar, then that single thread is the Sharia of the Prophet, of the God's last Sharia that is meant for the whole of mankind, not just for Muslims. It's unfortunate that this, this message is not. So if we look at the universal dimension of the Sharia, right, and not simply the one that is specific for the Muslim community, if you look at the universal dimension, then the Sharia is the promise, is the promise for the future of humanity. So thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Prof, for a very meaningful lecture. Since we have our dear brother minister with us, we would like to politely request if he would like to give a short comment before we take a question from participant. Honorable Minister, maybe you want to take a few minutes. You can unmute yourself.
Well, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Well, thank you so much, Prof. As always, your deliberations are deep and comprehensive and very, very enlightening. I have always looked forward to your lectures. As I've said earlier before you start, I told Sharan that I miss going to ISTAC for more than a year now. Looking forward to going there again. But I think you gave a very fresh outlook on the meaning of wasatiyah. I have been reading Kamali's book, of course, especially during my term at the Global Movement of Moderates. I agree with you. I think Kamali's book is probably the best yet that we can find in English, and I strongly recommend, just as you were recommending. I think this question of middleness is something that politicians all over the world need to learn. I have been advocating the idea. It's not my idea. It's well known among political scientists. The idea of centripetalism, which is actually about being a centrist, or moving to the center and avoiding all kinds of extremism. And extremism is both in the realm of politics and also non-political. And when it comes to non-political in the context of Malaysia, corruption is one of those big issues and big problem. But how I wish one day, Prof, you can host a panel discussion on centripetalism with, of course, Islamic, Islamic inputs. Again, the problem we face in the Muslim world today, after probably the 11th century, very little has been written in the non-Sharia, if I can use that arbitrarily, non-Sharia disciplines. Somehow, if I can borrow from Ahmed Kuru's latest book, unfortunately, some kind of alliances between some people, and he mentioned the ulama and the state, has to a great extent become a hindrance in progressive thinking. And because of that, people like you, for example, would find it very difficult to get a tauliah, to give a ceramah in masjid. But luckily we have ISTAC and IIUM as institutes of learning that would promote progressive ideas, modern and sciences, and so on. Anyway, I would love to see if one day ISTAC can hold a discussion. I think politics in this country and in the Muslim world needs some kind of injection for us to go beyond whatever that we are doing today. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof. Prof, you have to unmute yourself, Osman.
Inshallah, sorry. Inshallah, we can have organized program.
Okay, Prof. Okay, we take the first question from our brother Nuruddin. Prof, often the term moderation or middleness contrasts with the term radical Islam. The problem is that this radical term tends to be unclear and susceptible to being influenced by Islamophobic discourse. My question is how to ensure that the term moderation is rooted in the spirit of Islam itself and not trapped by the logic of Orientalism and Islamophobia.
Well, I mean, the question of there are people who misunderstand, misuse words like moderate, radical, extremist, especially when there is a politicization of the issue as happened in the different parts of the world, especially in the West when they want to refer to particular Muslim groups that they do not like. Yeah. That's why, I mean, we do not want our understanding of the middleness to be confined to just this kind of discourse, you know. So as you ask the question as to how, the whole lecture is precise, is the answer to your question. In other words, we have to explain the meaning, the correct meaning, the whole semantic field of the wasatiyah. To the point that I said the Arabic word wasatia even cannot be equated with simply the golden mean or the moderation in the sense of the middle of two extremes. All right. Yes, the main bulk of that idea of moderation is with regard to about this question of moral values, based on Aristotelian ethics, which also adopted by Muslim scholars in the past, Muslim philosophers, Muslim Sufis, Muslim theologians. Yeah? But our point is that still we cannot equate the two. Right? There are certain meanings attached to the word wasatiyah that are not to be found in the discourse in some other cultures. Right? I give an example. That physical, geographical meaning of the precisely because of the special meaning and significance of Makkah as the spiritual center. Whether people accept or not, outside Islam accept or not, that's another issue. That's a different matter. But the point is, as far as Muslims understand, all right, and that is based on the Quran, that connection between the change of Qibla and the identity of the Ummatan Wasatan. Thanks to Ibn Abbas and among others. So I think it is we need to just simply to understand that we are talking about in Islam a broad perspective, to talk about moderation. Moderation is not only about politics; it's not about political activities. It's a question of radicalism. Of course, we have our own. We have the Sharia. So we have to refer to the Sharia to talk about who is radical and who is not. For example, who is extreme or not. We have to discuss in the light of the teachings of the Sharia. I'm talking about the fundamental teachings of the Sharia, not what has been added to it in the name of the Sharia by some of some people, some Muslims. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something which is very clear, accepted as the principles of the Sharia. So how we look at others, how do this question of taparruf, the extremism. So extremism, the concept of extremism is very, very broad, not to reduce that to only to political extremism. If you even have a kind of that trend going from the center to the rim, to the peripheral, so that once some of the companions vowed to the Prophet, then they want to practice asceticism. They don't want to sleep at night. They want to pray the whole night. They want to fast every day. They don't want to do with their spouses. The Prophet scolded them. That is not my way. That is out of my fold. You're outside of my fold. All right? That has nothing to do with extremism that leads to violence. For example, it's nothing to do with that. It's just just a trend, a way of life that is moving from the standard practice of the Prophet Sallallahu. So I think it's important to write this, Brother Nuruddin.
Okay. The next one from Brother Said Jamaluddin. When it comes to the obstacles to realize middleness, the external factor, do you see any contact or society who achieve the external wasatiyah in our contemporary day of age? If not, how can we create this external contact to nurture our internal wasatiyah?
Well, as I see it, the challenge is not decreasing, not even it's not static. It is increasing. The challenge is getting greater and greater. This is the reality. So while the challenge is greater, our preparedness is not. Yeah. So our preparedness is not proportional to the threat and the challenge. All right. I think if we really do our preparedness through our tazkiyah and nafs, our purification, our practicing the Sharia, and then we together, not individual, we approach collectively, not just among Muslims, but also together with our other non-Muslim members of society, especially when there are so many commonalities. So we have to change the way our operate. So when we operate this way, inshallah, we will be able to overcome even the challenges scattered. Maybe by doing that, the challenge will become lesser. So, but at the moment, even in Muslim majority countries, let alone the Muslim minorities in Europe, for example, the challenge is there. But God has also given us the way, pointed out the way how to overcome that challenge. I think therefore for us, our task is to get together, and discuss what is this challenge. So if the challenge is common to many different religious groups, then we will act together. So in the context of Malaysia, many of the challenges are common to different religious groups. So if we, among our own group, are not able to overcome those challenges, we will combine our efforts, our response. So, for example, I'll talk just about this sustainable society. That's a challenge. Right? The planet Earth, our society, is both a biophysical ecology and cultural ecology are undergoing cracks here and there. Therefore, we have to come up with the idea of integral ecology, in which Islam has the means, has the ideas, the principles to create that integral ecology, in the sense of common approach to how to deal with environmental, ecological problems and to the cultural ecological problems. And I think the best thing in our context is let us work together with the other, among all religious groups. So I'm sure in the, beside Jamaluddin, you live in Sweden, all right? So in other words, there are like-minded people. They are different religions, different, but they agree on certain things about sustainability. And what we can do is enrich our discussion with them by adding the input from Islam, Islamic input on the issue of sustainability. That's why we want to do this. In the previous program at ISTAC regarding sustainable society and sustainable development, there was the complaint. The complaint was very legitimate that the United Nations has 17 sustainable development goals, but religion is imagined in a sideline. Religion there. All right. If the United Nations want to go for the lowest common denominator by removing religion, since to please the people who do not have religion, then we cannot just ignore that. I mean, the people of religion also have to get together. All right. Let the people of religion get together and approach the problem from another point, another perspective. The United Nations has adopted a particular approach to sustainability, which I consider as an alternative approach to God's model, God's approach. God tells us how to sustain the earth, and then the United Nations come up with a different model, challenging of, let's say, you, God, you are not relevant. We don't want you to be part of our effort to deal with sustainability. No, we cannot accept that. But since they don't do that, are we going to just sit down idly? No. Let us, the different group, okay, let us approach this issue of sustainability from the perspective of religion, from the perspective of spirituality, all right? And then we'll see what will be the response from the United Nations. Thank you.
Prof. Actually, you have answered the third question, but let me read it anyway from Sister Balkis. Thank you for delivering the lecture. I was wondering if you could explain a bit on sustainability and development. How do we as Muslims find the right metric of sustainable development, as we should strive for both the worldly life and hereafter with tawazun and balance? You want to add more, bro?
Yeah, I wish I were to say this in my next lecture next week and in the coming forum. Well, just to simply, I just would say my answer will still refer to the relevance, the role of the Sharia. In other words, of course, you have to understand. Piecemeal approach means just take particular aspects of the law, of the Islamic law, for example, and then try to apply that. Right? The other one is the holistic approach, looking at the Sharia in its totality to understand that. So I would put forward the idea that the Sharia is the practical, Sharia as a whole is the practical mechanism by which we can create sustainable society, sustainability. I already refer just now. I said by living the way of wasatiyah. My own humble view is that without practicing the important aspects of wasatiyah, then we cannot realize sustainability, because in many circles, when they want to talk about sustainability of the environment, of society, is always, in a sense, transferring the responsibility to the external people, to society, rather than pointing it to inside. Yeah? So I think that is weakness. To me, the problem, the solution is man himself. Man is the cause of the problem, as man is also the solution. But that depends on how we deal with our human condition. All right. So rather than hoping that by having an institution out there, the institution will do the job for us, that is not the Islamic. That's not the idea, right? This is a problem of the question of the changing notions of justice, changing notions of rights, changing notion of responsibility. Somehow it's always forget yourself, hope for the rest of the some institutions, especially hoping that some institution will do the job how to solve the problems that affect sustainability. But our approach here, the approach that I've been talking about today, no, it begins with oneself. It begins with oneself. So the different selves get together, right? The different selves get together how to overcome this problem. So individual responsibility needs to be given greater prominence into our approach. Rather than institution-oriented, it is rather self-oriented, realizing the power that God has given to every one of us to deal with problems. Thank you.
The next question from Brother Arianto. Islamic wasatiyah or Islam wasatiyah in your points correlate with Islamic postmodernism? If yes, where wasatiyah?
Islamic what?
Islam wasatiyah in your points correlates with Islamic postmodernism, postmodern Islam. Is it any correlation? If yes, where wasatiyah could contribute in what limitation?
Postmodernism?
Yeah, is Wasatiyah correlate with postmodernism, Islamic postmodernism,
Oh,
or IIIT any Islamic modernism?
well, yes and no. In other words, you're asking your question. Basically, you want to know if there are some commonalities between the Islam and postmodernism on the aspect of the no. Uh, the answer is yes and no, because in some respects, postmodernism is welcome. All right. For example, the respect for greater diversity. Certainly, it's a long different way from the perspective of modernism, which is very very Europe centric, Western centric. At least postmodernism is willing to listen to the voices of the other traditions. All right. For example, I give you a very good example. I'm from basically in the field of history or science, all right? There used to be a time when the modern science, meaning Western science, is the only valid form of science, right? But now, but after the 1970s onwards, we begin to have, no, um, greater awareness among some people in the West to see also the validity of Islamic science, of Chinese science, of even the indigenous science in Latin America and other things, what is the so-called local wisdom. Yeah, there has been a change at that. But still, there are many things. In other words, yes, the tendency to accept everything, but then that is not enough. I mean, there has to be some critical assessment of the things that you have accept. Yeah. So in the sense that everything can come in, all kinds of things mixed. Yeah. But there's no critical mind to assess that. And certainly Islam cannot just simply, while being open, it also has the concept of truth and falsehood, and what is true and what is not. Question of hierarchy, for example, things are not of the same level. So we have, I mean, this issue between Islam and postmodernism needs to be done in a very critical way. Yes, there are certain things that we welcome from postmodernism, but although those that, in a sense, which have not changed from the modern perspective.
Yeah, Prof. We will give you more time to wrap it up, to conclude. But we take the last question from Prof. Fatah Santoso. Is there connection between a way of middleness and maqasid Sharia?
There are two different issues. There are different issues. The maqasid Sharia is about the purposes of the Sharia. What are the higher objectives? What are the ultimate objectives of the Sharia? Wasatiyah, in comparison to maqasid Sharia, Wasatiyah would appear as the kind of the methods, the process how to realize the goals of the Sharia. So that's why the synonym for the Wasatiyah is tawasud, and tawasud in the Arabic structure of the Arabic language, tawasud, then the fifth verbal form, that as it implies a kind of effort, movement towards the center. Is a process, yeah, to be at the center, and it's more about how to lead a life. What sort of life you want to lead, right? Whereas maqasid Sharia are referring to the broader, the larger context. All right, they are not of the same epistemological level. When you talk about it, what's the difference between Wasatiyah and maqasid Sharia? Yeah, they are two different concepts. There are two different concepts dealing with different reality of the human condition. Of course, both deal with the human condition. In the case of Maqasid Sharia, is to discuss, let's say, for example, the leading Maqasid is preservation of religion, for example. So the idea of doctrine of preservation of the of religion, of the intellect, and other Maqasid, these are broader issues, right? In the sense that they determine the final, the ultimate context, which we are going to talk about the concept of satya. Okay.
Thank you so much, Prof. There are a few more questions, but we will forward it to you, inshallah. We will touch it in other time. Prof, you have plenty of time to wrap it up.
Well, I don't need, Roshan, I don't need really to wrap up, you know. If there is a question, give the question, because I just want, basically,
Okay, inshallah. So we take one from this Agus. Prof, was Satya Islam or modern Islam as the basis for work and institutional thinking? Satya Islam must be a solution in the midst of a strong indication of radicalism. What concrete strategies or stages should be taken in realizing Wasatiyah Islam?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear well.
Okay.
The sound is sort of.
Okay. I think the question is, what concrete strategies or stages should be taken in realizing Wasatiyah Islam? What are practical ways that we can implement?
The Wasatiyah is a particular mode procedure of realizing things. Right? For example, we want to realize certain quality, in a certain way. We have different tendencies. Basically, Wasatiyah is about how to come up with the ideal, with the ideal situation in which to act on things. It's not something that Wasatiyah is not. It's not a particular. It's not a particular object. It's not a particular act. So that does not have individual identity. Rather, it is referring to a particular perspective, right? A particular, let's say just now said, let's say we have different trends in society of extremism. There are different streams of extremism. Now we are referring for the principle of Wasatiyah, so that people will act accordingly. How to act accordingly? The Sharia has to provide. So, as I said, in a sense, in order to practice Wasatiyah, we need the Sharia. We need the Sharia principle, because the Sharia, they will tell us when they have different degrees of extremism. So we have to deal according to that challenge, to that reality, by means of the Sharia. So it is the Sharia itself that provides the answer, the way how to do it. Right? The Wasatiyah provides the intellectual framework in which we are going to make the decision. Right? So that's why it's important to understand. From your question, you understand that like Wasatiyah referring to a particular act, to particular process, to particular. No, it is simply you're going for that middleness. So because this is quality. Wasatiyah is a quality. Middleness is a quality, not a particular concrete object. But we can judge a particular object in the light of our Wasatiyah. This conceptual relationship This I think needs to be understood.
Yeah, Prof. Okay.
Yeah, as you can see, the meaning to be at the center, to be the moderate, to be to be the best, and so on. It's all referring to frame, to the frame of mind. All right. There's more to our attitude. Yeah? It's our attitude, how to deal with a thing. Right? But the process, the concrete process of assessing a particular problem, yes, the spirit of Wasatya, but the Wasatya itself cannot provide the it is the Sharia. You have to go back to the Sharia.
Yeah, Prof.
Okay.
Okay. Actually, the first question is from Imam Hanafi. Question is so complicated. We'll take the last one. In the axiological aspect, should Sufism be a compulsory practice for moderate Islam?
Sufism will be
in the axiological aspect, should Sufism be a compulsory practice for moderate Islam? I mean, to be moderate, we should practice Sufism.
Well, I mean, that is a very generalized statement. I cannot just say yes. I mean, it depends. I mean, I can only answer a concrete situation, but we cannot generalize. So you ask, is it? I said, well, yes and no. It depends. It depends on the yes. If you look to refer to the among certain groups in the West, for example, they tend, say, to have that view compared to other groups of Muslims. They'll say that Muslims are more pacific and more peaceful, oriented, and so on. But that's the Western view, yeah, Western view. So we need, but of course we cannot pose that question to get answers from Muslims just if we pose that question that way. In other words, because that is very it's kind of having a group and block, just as if everyone who is called Sufi will follow that, because it's not a monolithic term. Yeah, more the Sufis in Islam are as divided as the people of the group. There is no one monolithic group with one attitude, with one kind of values, with one approach, and you call them the Sufis. No, that's not true. Does not correspond to reality. Yeah, there are Sufis who more. Yeah, there are Sufis who go to jihad, for example. All right. So is it wrong then for Sufis to go to jihad? You have said, for example, Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi in North Africa. That great Sufi in North Africa, he fought against the French, but at the same time, he was an ideologue of Ibn Arabi. For the West become very confusing. So what kind of Sufis here now? So you have Sufis, who don't want to fight, and those Sufis who like to fight. Yeah? So that applies also not only to Sufis, also to even to the Fuqaha. You cannot say the Fuqaha have only one attitude towards something to challenge. So I think we should not. We should avoid now trying to avoid that kind of categorization that somehow we can give very Sufis. There are certain kind of people that you can give certain that you can categorize them as distinct from the mutakallim or from the philosophers.
Thank you so much, Prof. Brother Said said Omar Mukhtar, Sheikh Yusuf Makassari also is fight against the Dutch. He was a Sufi leader in his time, inshallah. Okay, Prof, thank you so much. I think we have spent 1 hour 45 minutes. We'll give you the final minute, Prof, for concluding remarks.
Well, thank you very much to all of you for this. Really hope that inshallah this COVID-19 will end soon. But of course, as it is, God his own ways. There's always hikmah, and certainly because I cannot have programs at ISTAC. Yes, Datuk Saifuddin have to come to ISTAC, but then this webinar has also been good for people in other countries to be able to to have. So that's pros and cons, and God, as I said, knows best. And then, so thank you. But I do welcome you all to next week's forum on the 24th, 24th of this month, the forum on the Sharia and the pursuit of sustainable societies. So thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you, our dear brother minister, for coming with the group today. Inshallah, thank you everyone. We'll see everyone the next session. We close with Tasbih Kifarat.